companion for sure. And let's do the limitless for limitless contemplation. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness which can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal impartial compassion, free of bias towards friends and enemies. Senchen damje dewatang dewa wejutang dempajuchik dungal tang dungal chichu tang drawajuchik dungal mepe dewa tampatang mindrawajuchik nering chaktang nitang drawe tanung chempolane pajuchik. So good evening, everybody. And we're going to do Developing Boundless Vision, part 2 tonight. And I think it's actually a very exciting subject. And whenever I'm listening to any other Dharma, I'm always actually thinking about this boundless vision, because I think that most Dharma, hello Mal, is about boundless vision. And I think it is Lynn's. Oh dear, your screen keeps freezing. Try and go off. Lynn's, go off and then come back on. Go off, switch off your thing and then come back on, and you'll probably find that it's much better like that. Okay, so we are going to do this boundless vision, boundlessness, both in this dimension of samsara, even in your everyday relationships and how we view things day to day, and in a higher dimension, how with boundless vision, we begin to view the truth of the coarse elements. Remember, we are made of coarse elements, and everybody is made of coarse elements, okay? Everything is made of coarse elements. And how do we see through from those coarse elements into those absolutely pure elements? It's okay, Linz? Okay, good. So I want to start with a very, because I like to start on this dimension and then move to a much higher dimension, because that's what we were doing last time. So I want to start. Now, why did all this get mixed up? I had it all beautifully put here. I want to start with a beautiful story of Helen Keller, because I think she really is quite an inspiration. So how do you account for your remarkable accomplishment in life? Queen Victoria of England asked Helen Keller, how do you explain the fact that even though you were both blind and deaf, you were able to accomplish so much? Miss Keller's answer is a tribute to a dedicated teacher. If it not had been for Annie Sullivan, the name of Helen Keller would have remained unknown. According to Zig Ziglar, little Annie Sullivan, as she was called when she was young, was no stranger to hardship. She was almost sightless herself due to a childhood fever, and was at one time diagnosed as hopelessly insane by her caregivers. She was locked in the basement of a mental institution outside of Boston. On occasion, little Annie would violently attack anyone who came near, and most of the time she generally ignored everyone in her presence. An elderly nurse could see something in her and believed there was hope, and made it her mission to show love to the child. Every day she visited little Annie, and for the most part, the child did not acknowledge the nurse's presence, but she still continued to visit. The kindly woman left cookies for her and spoke words of love and encouragement. She believed through her vision that little Annie could recover if only she was shown love. Eventually, the doctors noticed a change in the girl. Where they once witnessed anger and hostility, they now noted an emergent gentleness and love. They moved her upstairs, where she continued to improve, and finally, this hopeless child was released. And she grew into a beautiful young woman with a desire to help others as she was helped by the nurse. It was she who could see with absolute open vision the great potential in Helen Keller. She loved her, disciplined her, played with her, pushed her, and worked with her until the flickering candle that was her life became a beacon of light to the world. Annie Sullivan worked wonders in Helen's life, but it was a loving nurse who first believed in little Annie and lovingly transformed an uncommunicative child into a compassionate teacher. If it had not been for Annie Sullivan, the name of Helen Keller would have remained unknown. But if it had not been for the kind and dedicated nurse and her vision, the name of Annie Sullivan would have remained unknown. And so it goes. Just how far back does this chain of being able to see and redeem people extend? And how far forward will it lead? Now, that's a very, very interesting story, because I think that when we're looking at boundless vision, we're looking at seeing people in a completely different way. It's really important to see people in a different way, to be able to look through that boundless vision and never to stop seeing that. And if we can have my lovely cartoon with it not giving up, that'll be nice. So this was sent to me, and I love this cartoon, because if you see the little guy, the little bird who's getting, the little frog who's getting strangled, okay, by the crane, and he's sweating, but he isn't giving up, holding on, and he says, "Don't ever give up." Such an important cartoon, okay. And then I just want to say that Mingyur Rinpoche, in his Joy of Living, said the sense of openness that people experience when they simply rest their mind is known in Buddhist terms as emptiness. And he says emptiness is the most misunderstood word in the whole of Buddhist philosophy, because Westerners misinterpret it as nothingness. Nothing could be further from the truth the Buddha sought to describe. Tongpa means empty, but only in the sense of something beyond our ability to perceive with our senses and our concept to conceptualize. He says a better translation might be inconceivable, unnameable. And he says in Tibetan, the word emptiness is tongpa ni. And he says ni doesn't have a particular meaning in everyday Tibetan, but when you add it to another word like tongpa ni, it conveys a sense of possibility and an unlimited potential for anything to appear, change, or disappear. And because of emptiness, we perceive things different from others. Emptiness has got all this potential. And when we can begin to understand it, and you know, Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche was doing a Zoom with 1,000 people. It was in India, I couldn't believe it, for all over the world. And someone asked, "Can you please tell me how to meditate on emptiness?" And what he said was very interesting. He said, first, in Buddhism, for the babes in the wood who can't understand things, he said, just contemplate impermanence. As soon as you contemplate impermanence, it expands into, well, if things are impermanent, like where do they go to? What happens to them? Okay, because they're impermanent, they dissolve. Because where do they dissolve? They dissolve into the essence again. And so we begin to have we have an idea that from the essence arises 5 beautiful lights, which then spread absolutely wide open. And how do we see those lights? That's our most important question that we have to ask tonight, because seeing those lights is a very, very important thing, because what are they? there is a very great difference when we begin to see things in a different way. Just one more little story and then we'll go on. A Rachel Raymond story. She says, when we are seen by the heart, we are seen for who we are. We are valued in our uniqueness by those who are able to see us in this way and be able to come to know and value us. The first time I was seen this way, I was very small, maybe 3. I had never met my godfather. He lived in another city. And when it was clear that he was dying, I was taken to his home so he could see me for the first time. My mother told me that I was going to meet my godfather and that he was dying. I was so small, I didn't get the time sense quite right and understood I was going to see someone who was dead. I looked forward to this for days, she says. I remember the details of this meeting very clearly, especially my godfather's bed. It was very high, higher than I could see and made of dark carved wood. My mother had lifted me up, and lying there among the pillows with his eyes closed was a very old man. He was completely still and so thin that the covers didn't arise over him very much. She put me down next to him, between him and the wall, and she was talking to me softly, but I wasn't listening. I was watching him with interest. Then his daughter called to my mother from the kitchen, and my mother turned away and went out into the hall for a short time to see what she wanted. In those few moments, my godfather opened his eyes and looked at me. I remember how blue his eyes were and how warm. In a voice that was barely more than a whisper, he called me by my name. He seemed to be trying to say something more. I was very young, 3 years old, but I knew that whispers meant secrets. So I leaned toward him to hear. He smiled at me, a beautiful smile, and said, "I've been waiting for you." My family were intellectual, formal, well-mannered people who were not openly affectionate or demonstrative. My godfather's eyes and his smile were full of great love and appreciation. For the first time in my life, I felt a deep sense of being welcomed, of mattering to someone. His hands were resting on the covers, and still smiling, he slid one a little toward me. Then he closed his eyes. After a short while, he sighed deeply and was still again. I continued to sit there, remembering his smile, until my mom came back. She looked closely at my godfather and then snatched me up from the bed and ran from me from the room because my godfather had died. My parents were deeply distressed about my being alone with my godfather when he died. It was the 40s, and they consulted a child psychologist to help me over the trauma of this experience. Yet my own experience had been quite different. It was many years before I could tell my parents what had really happened and how important it was to me. Now, you know, just that whole story just shows us how out of touch we are, never mind with the elements and the pure thing, but how out of touch we were. She had the most precious experience of her life that as an adult she could write about it and say was the most beautiful time that she came so close to death, and to someone who was so alert and alive and could see her as she was, not in an intellectual way. Now we have to do this in order to really, really, really open ourselves up to a different kind of experience. And last week, I was talking about, you know, Keith Dowman in his book about A Matter of Mind. He said that we walk through a doorway, I told you last week, and that's the doorway of non-duality. And suddenly we can see all the things that we were never able to see. And he said, Nirvana lies in clear seeing, in the clarity, not in the specific form that's seen when suffering and anxiety color the whole spectrum of possibility. He says, the forms that we see belong to our karmically determined lifestyles. That's all. And you know, when I listen to people, when I was listening to a couple today, and I was thinking, they just can't see each other except through their own assumptions, through their own misconceptions about each other. And it's always on that scoreboard. And we have to stop. Sometimes we have to step outside of ourselves and look at another person and actually see them. It's irrelevant. He said, which persona clothes our body mind when we're playing in a drama of life? And what he said at the end of that, which was very interesting, he says, to reinforce the notion of this duality of our illusions, we could say that our perception of people is a lie. A lie. Sure, that's a big, hectic thing. And that our perception of the world we live in is a universal lie. A universal lie. Because the recognition of those lies provides an occasion for lightness of being, we can also call it a joke, a cosmic joke. Oi, a cosmic joke. Longchenpa insinuates the notion of the universal lie and the cosmic joke into a section of meditation. Now that's very, very interesting because, if we think that it's all quite a joke, and last week I was telling you about all of that, and if it's all a cosmic joke, what are we seeing? What are we doing here? Where are we going? I was listening to Zongsa Kienzi speaking about, someone asked him a question in that big audience, like, what about artificial intelligence? What about AI? Does he think that artificial intelligence could train young people in Buddhism? It's quite a scary notion, okay? But he said, most important of all, he said, I don't know a lot about artificial intelligence. Eugene can tell us more of it. But he said, what is interesting, he said, I could see it working in the future. And he said, you know what? He said, the thing about, he said, if you're a nurse and you think of artificial intelligence later on taking your job away, okay, so there won't be a job. He said, it's a loss of your identity. And he said, how brilliant is it to lose your identity? Now ponder that, because it's a very interesting thing. Because if you lose your identity to artificial intelligence, then you better find something internal to replace it. So I just want to give you a little teaching more, and then I'll stop and throw it open. So when the Buddha taught, he taught the three wheels, Dharma wheels, the three wheels of turning. Don't know why I can't speak tonight, okay? The Hinayana or Shravakayana, okay, is all about the individual and their suffering, and then trying the whole process of clearing the suffering, putting the individual away from all the negative emotions and all the suffering and everything, renunciating everything, giving it up, taking us away from seeing all those terrible things. That's the Hinayana, and then you attain arahatship for yourself. But that isn't really seeing. Seeing is to see, not when you're away, not when you're in the Himalayas in a mountain retreat, when you're here, dealing every day with all people's rubbish, with wars, with all sorts of things, I saw in Kiev today on the television that, with all the bombing that Russia's doing there, that people during the day, even though they were in bunkers at night, they're walking around the streets as though things were normal. People are shopping, people are sitting at cafes and things like that. It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable, because how do we see it all? Okay. And so Hinayana is all about the individual causes of suffering. But remember, the Buddha did say there could be a cessation of suffering. If you could see it as it really is, the suffering could end. And then the Mahayana goes more to purification and doing it for the sake of all people, okay? And the Buddha did start to talk about shunyata, emptiness, in the Mahayana. And then the Vajrayana, when you really look at it in the context of what we're saying, in Vajrayana, we suddenly open up, and this is what I want to talk about tonight, to that 100 deity mandala, that 100 quality mandala in the essence of our true nature, and how when we look at that mandala and become one of the deities, we become the qualities of that deity. Say we become Chenrezi, or we become Tara, or we become whoever, we now changing the theater of our identity for another theater. It's still illusory, but it's not impure. Our vision that we have on a day-to-day basis is impure, illusory vision. Means nothing is true. When we do the Vajrayana practice and we do the deity practice and we begin to understand that mandala in our heart, it then becomes pure, illusory vision. Very interesting, because what's the difference between pure illusory vision and impure illusory vision? It means, pure means there's a whole lot of truth to it. Okay? But the illusory part means it dissolves afterwards back into the essence. It's a very interesting thing. So Vajrayana takes us to the path of transformation. But right at the top of Vajrayana, it becomes self-liberation. It liberates of itself. When whatever we are thinking, whatever we are feeling, whatever we are experiencing dissolves, liberates of itself. If we don't interfere with it, then we begin to understand self-liberation. That all these feelings, I was so angry today, I was so sad today, I was so afraid today, I was so envious today. All of these are just illusions. There's absolutely no truth in them. And when we look at them clearly, they're the coarse elements. When we turn them to the pure elements, it's a completely different story. So I just want to give you one more thing, and then I will throw it open. Anam Tupten, in his book called The Citadel of Awareness, he gives a wonderful description, and I want you to listen carefully, of what happens at the moment that your consciousness awakens. What actually happens when your consciousness starts awaking? Because then you're going to go into boundless vision. Now, this is what he says, and it's very, very, very interesting. In the primordial ground, our essence, who we really are, our pure awareness, or our original pure consciousness, is awakened by what is called the life force. So something is going to come into the consciousness, a life force, and awaken it, okay? Then the moment it wakes up as this extraordinary phenomena, and then it begins to experience its own display. So when the consciousness wakes up and starts to see things, immediately it knows, this is my own display. What happens with ordinary sentient beings? They don't know. They think it's out there. They think somebody else put it there. They think it's a bad thing they're encountering. But when the life force comes into the consciousness, then it begins to experience its own display. So whatever is happening, whatever is arising, it knows. It's the display of the essence, nothing more. It's not something separate from me. Even if an angry person comes in front of you, it's your creation of your own display from your essence, okay? And then it comes into being. And how does it come into being? Thoughts, colors, shapes, and 5 colors emerge when it is waking up. 5 colors emerge. And this display of the colors is none other than your own essence, your own ground, okay? Display, what you're seeing, and the essence are no different. They're one thing, it's very important. Now, when it arises, when that consciousness arises, okay, when it arises, this is the critical moment, the moment when awareness or unawareness take place. So in other words, when the life force touches your consciousness, you at that critical moment, you either become aware or you become unaware, okay? And also it's a moment where nirvana and samsara come into being in our consciousness, because at that moment, consciousness has 2 potentials. So your consciousness is now awake, and it can go either way. Either it can become enlightened, or it can become deluded. It can go either way. Sometimes it goes to freedom, cheers, and sometimes it goes to imprisonment, handcuff. It's up to you. And he says, I thought this was so interesting, when consciousness makes its choice to use its potential for freedom, then consciousness realizes in that critical moment, hey, everything I'm witnessing is not some kind of intrinsically existent type of objective reality, but this whole thing that I'm seeing, it's all a self-display. It's called Rang Nang in Tibetan. Now, either we choose to see that everything is not separate from us and it takes us into freedom, or we choose duality and imprisonment, and then it's me, I, mine, okay, versus everybody else, and I need to possess it, or I need to get rid of it, or I need to, it's all coarse. We've got that choice. And I found that paragraph so interesting, because just to redo it, and then I'm throwing it open if you want to discuss, but just to think that the life force comes and touches the consciousness, and there are 5 colors that come out of the life force, and at that critical moment, you can either see with boundless open vision, or you imprison yourself, and it's me, mine, my little world. And don't do this to me, and I don't want this, and I do want this, and I'll give that to you in a lot of depth if you want. But tell me what you think about it, because isn't it interesting that when you're walking along the road and something happens to you, anything, you can meet somebody, you can just suddenly think, oh, how beautiful the flowers are. You can just have a dawning of anything. It doesn't have to be in a meditation when you're sitting there. And you've got to decide, can you stand back and let all these things unfold because they're all part of your own display? Or do you start categorizing, turning off those, holding on to those, everything separate from me? It's our choice. Okay, Eugene, you're concentrating, you're in that thinking position. Come on, guys, let's hear you. So few guys tonight. I don't know where all the guys are. What do you think, Eugene?
Well, on your AI content, I think ChatGPT can definitely be like a Buddha assistant or Buddhist teacher assistant. So you can ask it questions. How would you deal with this? What is your perception of? What do the teachings say about? But the experiential piece, I'm struggling enough to get that from the teachings. So, like, what does the vibrations and the energies and the experiences actually feel like, not just the theory of it?
Yeah.
So that it won't be able to do.
No, it won't be able to do the artificial intelligence. And I'm
But
sure
it can definitely help with, like, I think it can definitely help with life coaching almost, because
yeah,
I
with
think
samsaric coaching to be a much better person in samsara, maybe, Eugene.
yeah, but like it can break down the teachings for you into layman's terms. It can rewrite things quite effectively for you. So it can explain concepts quite easily, actually.
Yeah, but you see, this is not a concept. And that's the whole thing. You know, I'm sure it can explain lots. So for the basic teachings that the Buddha gave in order to help the babes in the wood, in other words, people were not going to understand. I mean, think of the Buddha's situation. He was in India, it was mostly a Hindu society at that stage, and they had their gods and they had everything external. And it's unbelievable how superstitious they are. I mean, whenever I've been in India, you know, these taxis and all of them, they're so superstitious. Everything's external. So a cat runs across the road or this runs across the road, and then they go, we're going to have an accident. That's a sign that we're going to have an accident. I said to the taxi, for sure you're going to have an accident if you don't change your attitude, because you're actually attracting an accident to yourself, you know. But that's how our minds are. And I wonder, I don't think artificial intelligence could ever help us to see boundless vision. I think boundless vision, which has to be seen through your eyes, even though it's beyond your eye, your normal sight. But I think boundless vision has got to be seen when you're totally open and when you totally want to understand, how do I get to see people differently?
Yeah, but that's your energies must be aligned to have that boundless vision. So that's the stuff that AI won't be able to tell you.
Right.
Because also the Buddha didn't also just teach by word. So he emitted the energies and the Vajra speech, and he didn't even have to speak. Sometimes he could just emit the wisdom.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that it is on another level. But tell me something, all of you. Do you want to see this? Do you want to try this? Or are you actually very happy with where your life is at? Do you want the transition? Do you want to be awakened? Do you want to be free? I mean, it's so important. You know, do you want to? I think people are really scared to see things. Yes, Leila, tell me, what did you think? I'm glad. And you
I'd love to see things differently. I mean, I try to not be fixated in my views and be open-minded, but this sounds like a different level almost. I'm not sure, like, yeah, I imagine it will kind of change things quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yet, I'm not sure how.
Yeah, you know what? It's not even the how yet, because I can't tell you how you're going to do it. I can just try and awaken the mind a little bit to know that how we see things. You see, for me, what I can only tell you what for me made a real difference. I was saying last week that Taisito Rinpoche said, when you get to Rikpa Tsepe, that's right up after all the stains, all the solid stains are there, And then the stains start breaking up, and then you reach Rikpa and Tsepe. And when you get there, there's no turning back. You can never, ever, ever see life in the same way. There's no turning back. Now, you know, it starts even with one's perception of other people. That's what I try and teach so much, because, you know, my husband who's sitting here, we often have debates about certain people that might be irritating, neurotic, you know, over obsessive compulsive, or absolutely crazy, or whatever the case is. And I would have gone along with that long ago. But now I fully understand that if you've got a person like that, and you're able to see them in a completely different light, in other words, you take your assumption, your self, your role, your whatever it is that you are, you take it out of the equation. And now you're looking nakedly at that person, and you realize that because of all the things that have happened in their life, this is how they see things. And that makes such a difference, because it gives you absolute compassion instead of irritation for that person. So it starts on a personal level, even a child that one has, that one might feel, this child has really let me down a lot, and look what's happened and everything. And suddenly you see that. I remember one of the couples that used to come to my group, they had a really mentally very, very handicapped grandchild. And the way they saw this child, not child, he's already grown, but the way they viewed him, how they could see his movements, because he, who didn't have the intellect and didn't have the mind, could see things as they are. So he was just fascinated with things, smiled at things that he saw as they wheeled him along in his wheelchair and everything. And they could appreciate this, that this human body, which was so handicapped and didn't have the intellect of other people, actually had much more than the normal intellect. So it starts by just stopping and seeing. And in that quote that I've given you, he just says, it's the moment of awakening, and you'll all have it. If you just become aware, you'll have a moment of awakening. You'll either be listening to a teaching, you'll be watching a YouTube, you'll be reading something, you'll be listening to a very angry person, you'll be doing something like that, and you'll just go, oh. And you just start to see it in a very different way. Now, it happens in little phases, because think about this. I'm going to give you a meditation now on a crystal, because if you take a crystal, I did this in a morning group. If you take this crystal, which has got a Buddha in the middle, I don't know if you can all see it at all. It's got a little Buddha in the middle. But if this crystal gets hit by the sun, what it does is it starts to radiate beautiful colors, 5 colors, okay? Now, it's interesting when you see it in a crystal, because the crystal is our Buddha nature and our essence. And out of the essence comes 5 different colors. Okay, now I want you to listen to this, and then we'll do it as a meditation. Okay. Only when the crystal is struck by the light or the sun do all those rays come out. Only when it's struck. In other words, just what Anand Tupton was saying, there is that moment when the life force strikes. It actually strikes us. A lot of times we're just not aware of it. And when the crystal is struck with either the light or the sun, when you hold it up, if it's struck by the light or the sun, what happens is it emits 5 rays of light of different colors, rainbow lights. Now, this is our own creativity, our own ongoing display from our essence. It's such an amazing thing if you can get this. It really is. I'm just going to mute you. You can unmute when you want to talk, because otherwise all the sounds, hang on, sorry, not that. Go away. Sorry. I'm just going to mute everybody because otherwise all your sounds come there. Okay. So, and then unmute yourself if you want to speak, but then mute yourself again because otherwise it's very noisy. Okay. So when you've got this crystal going out with the 5 colored lights, that's our own creativity. If we're able to see and realize it, then what happens is the 5 rays actually become an expression of our true nature. But if we can't see those rays, if we can't understand them, then the elements get coarse. And then the 5, we see that everything becomes 5 sensory objects and 5 aggregates. What are the sensory objects? The things we see, the things we hear, the things we smell, the things we touch, the things we taste. And those 5 lights become 5 aggregates: form, feelings, perceptions, habits, and consciousness. And those 5 aggregates become 5 poisons: anger, ignorance, craving and attachment, pride, and envy and jealousy. So in other words, if we can't see those elements, if we can't see what happens, they go coarse and then they become what we know. So I become a being of 5 aggregates. I've got a form, I've got feelings, I've got my absolutely biased perception, I've got my ordinary consciousness, I've got my habits. But what happens when it doesn't happen? What happens if we wake up to those 5 lights? Can anyone tell me what happened? Well, I'll tell you. It's very interesting. Because if we wake up when the life force strikes and we recognize these rainbow lights, then those 5 sensory objects, seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and everything, become 5 pure lands. They become pure lands. The 5 mind aggregates become 5 male Buddhas. Don't worry about a Buddha being a person. They just become 5 awakened things. The 5 afflictive emotions become 5 modes of primal awareness, different ways of knowing that beautiful awareness. And the 5 elements become 5 female Buddhas. And you've got a full pure land in front of you. Not sensory objects, all the aggregates, form, feelings, perceptions, all the afflictive emotions, anger, ignorance. It's that point at which it all changes. And I can see you all concentrating very hard. But remember, if we can't see that, we just go back to our everyday life with all our misperceptions, with all our angers, with all our ignoring of the truth, with all our craving, with our vision, with what we hear, with what we taste, with what we smell. We just go back to ordinary life in samsara. Hello, and another life on the wheel of life, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one, until we wake up. And when the life force hits us, we say, I know. These are all the 5 different kinds of wisdoms. These are all the 5 kind of different ways of knowing reality. And we're awake. We passed all that negative stuff. Now, even if you don't get anything, I can do a lot with you tonight, but even if you don't get anything, give me your, Fiona, you are looking. Tell me what you feel.
Before that, Lindsay's got her hand raised. I think Lindsay needs to come here.
Please, Liz, please, go on.
Thanks. Mel, what you're talking about, is that what you were mentioning last week about the vivid colors that you saw in the sky?
Yeah, exactly that. But that was just at the beginning. You know, it's interesting because Tulku Urgen's, I think it was his father or someone he was very, very close to was dying, or the purser, he was someone, one of his attendants, he was somebody who was very, very highly evolved. And as he was dying, he actually said, oh, and he started to describe all of this, you know. He started to say, oh my goodness, look at the colors. Look at I can see this, I can see that. And while he was seeing all of this and all of them were sitting around his bed, he just popped off. Okay. Now, when he popped off, he would have gone straight into the Barda of Dharmata. He would have gone in and seen, because when we die, if you know about this, even if you can't do it during your life, if you know about it, then at death, for absolute sure, you will be able to understand this, Linz. There's no doubt about it. You see, because it's always, when we go from the essence, it's always 5 rays of light, because there are 5 different ways of being aware. Mirror-like wisdom, the wisdom of the Dharma Dhatu, all the different primordial wisdoms are right there in front of us. But if you can't see them, then you see the coarse elements, you see the anger, the ignorance, the envy, the jealousy, you see the sensory objects, you see the form, the physical form. That's why people say, oh, so-and-so died, will I be able to see them? But they're in a mental body. But you will see them as they were, but they won't really be as they were, but that's your vision. That's what you see. So all of this is so interesting, because when you die and all of this dissolves, the elements dissolve, the form dissolves, the feelings dissolve. I mean, what's so fascinating to me in the Bardo teachings is that at that time of death, when the inner elements dissolve, all the emotions go away. I mean, how do you explain that it's so perfect that all the negative emotions, passion, aggression, and delusion, all of them disappear when those inner elements are dissolving? Why? Because then you're free to see. When you don't have all those negative emotions, this is good, this is bad, I want this, I don't want this, that person's terrible. You can't pass into pure perception when you're hanging on to that. Marcel, you are contemplating so deeply. Sorry, Fee, did you want to say something? Or Mimi, go.
No, go ahead.
Go, Mim.
Oh, do you want to, is Fee going to speak?
No, it's fine, speak.
Okay. Yeah. Mel, there are so many studies being done with the psilocybin, which is, the magic mushrooms as such. And there's a scientific documentary, and it shows you the doctors, the scientists, and these people that partake of this, they just go straight, they break through all those boundaries you're speaking about. And they all say, can't you see it? There's total light. I'm part of everything. There's no separate self. They break through this natural substance. We're trying to do it in another way, but immediately you just see how they break through into that total light. And then they say to the doctors around them, can't you see it? Can't you feel it? So it's something very fascinating, and it's going to be used a lot.
Very fascinating, and people are always offering it to me. You know, they always offer it to me. But I think the Buddha had a real reason why he said, never take psychedelic things or anything to actually to be able to see. Now, let me say this to you. If you live, let's say, in the Amazon, you know, if you lived, let's say, in a society where it was an accepted part of the culture to take these psychedelic drugs or these hallucinogens that are natural, you know, all of those kind of things. If you were in that situation where this was part of the rituals of daily life and everybody did it in their culture, it would be a completely different story, okay? Really a different story, because it's done under the supervision of people, and, you know, maybe children do it right from early on in their lives and that kind of thing, and it's under a controlled thing. But the bottom line is, you think about, I have so many people over the years who've come and seen me after they've done magic mushrooms, this, that, and the other, and then they go, Melanie, you would love it. You would just be able to go there. You would absolutely love it. I don't understand why you don't do it. Okay, the reason I don't do it is because my belief system is, when you are awakened enough, there it is.
I agree, but
There
to get
it is.
there, I agree.
And when people
But to
have
get there is not.
when people have it, and when suddenly they're living their samsaric life and they go and take something and then they have these amazing experiences, let me tell you, some of those people do not know where to put this.
I know.
How would you know where to put it? So they have these experiences. They don't know how to adapt them. I would much rather have it slowly. I had one or two experiences, you know, sitting at Taisitu under a very learned master, and I was totally protected, okay? And then I could take it and bring it out into the world slowly, slowly, slowly.
Well, that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, well, I don't know, you know, but I just think
under scientific.
I think people who haven't got the wisdom, haven't got the knowledge, and just do these things, what do you make of it?
No, they can't make anything of it.
Yeah, they
I've
can't.
done it.
Okay, and what happened for you? Was it before your spiritual path?
No, I made it part of my Buddhist path. So I did a full week cleanse, no meat, no alcohol, no sugar, no sex, nothing.
Okay.
And I made it part of my spiritual journey, and it was profound. So you could feel, you really feel part of the universe. I could feel
Amazing.
myself tapping into the codex of the universe, and you can feel the space in between the louvers of your blinds. You feel that connected to everything, but it is quite intense. And I think I agree with Melanie, people ego trip on these things.
Absolutely.
And they jump from the one experience and they want to chase that high. I wanted to do it because I was coming to Stellenbosch and I needed to decide between two jobs. And it helped me heal a lot of stuff. And also it kind of showed me that I found my life partner. So it revealed that to me. So like it is a very beautiful thing. I don't think it's something I know people with epilepsy and all different kind of psychosocial stuff microdose to deal with PTSD and that kind of stuff, and that's a coping strategy for it. And I think it is very interesting, but I think if you want to go on a real trip, it's something you should really make part, and you need to ask for protection with the lineage and like like I
But
wanted
you know,
to
it's
go
so
on the,
interesting, Eugene, because none of our masters, I know Dhammayeshi has experiences all the time, and he's never, ever, ever taken a single substance. You know why people want to take substances when you're in the West? Because quick fix, quick finding. For me, what is really important in all of this, those of you that really, really want to discover, start by learning about primordial consciousness. Now, what I did was I did a whole series on a Monday morning. Some of you were there. And I really spoke about the 5 wisdoms and everything. You can go and ask Nadine. These are not on YouTube. They were before she put them on YouTube. So there's a whole lot of those on the 5 wisdoms and primordial consciousness. You can go and see, you can ask her to send you the titles and choose 1 or 2 that you'd really like to listen to. But for me, before you have an experience like this, you know, if you watch how these masters, how they train our minds, number 1, you have got to have done preliminary practices. You've got to have done Nondra, cleansing, Vajrasattva, all of those kind of things. And you know, they will not touch you until you have done that, because that is the requirement for the physical body and for what you need, you know, for what you need to do. Now, I don't care if people do 110,000 of them, or you just do a few, but you really cleanse yourself with all of them. And I will help anybody who wants to do that. And I mean, there is Alan Muller, and, you know, you can go and do the Nondra very easily, and you can go and listen to all my things that were all recorded on the 5 wisdoms, the 5 ways of knowing reality, the primordial consciousness, what it all meant. And slowly train your mind. And if you do, I promise you, a master will come your way who will give you the teaching and the background and the empowerments to be able to do these sort of things. But in the meantime, what is important, and let's do a meditation, and I'm going to give you some of the 5 rays and what they really are about. But in the meantime, it's really important that you just know that everything that is in front of you is a display of your own essence. And when you can see that, and that's in that thing that I read you, he says the life force comes, and at that moment, consciousness is awakened. Now, a lot of people will then choose to go into bondage, into imprisonment, into delusion. Why? Because it's much safer. We've been doing it for eons of time, okay? It's not safe to really know that the world isn't as it seems to be. It's really, you need a lot of courage to say, wow, this is how the world is, and this is the journey I want to take. And I want to train myself in boundless vision, in limitless vision, because I want to see things as they are, not as we see them in impure, illusory vision. To start with the practices where we see pure illusory vision, and finally to see things as they really are, which is exactly what happens to us at the gate of death. However, how many people recognize at death? Relatively very few. So in the first 2 bardos, the bardo of the first bardo, where you see the clear light, the second bardo of Dharmata, where you see this expression of the 5 rays, it's all there. And the majority of people just faint and then wake up in the bardo of becoming, where the same old karma is cast on the screen, and it's too late to do very much about it. You can stop yourself from catapulting into another birth, But none of you must do that. You've got to wake up by studying this now, by opening your eyes and by understanding what I'm saying. Just the beginning. You don't have to have gone into the Bardo of Dhammata. But Tulku Urchin Rinpoche says, if you don't want to experience a Bardo of Dhammata, experience it while you're in a body. I'd love to. That's what the rainbow body is about. That's what the rainbow body is about. So let's do the meditation and then let's take your questions. I'm just going to give you a little bit of this. So get into your meditation posture. We didn't even do those things that I had. Just, Fiona, before we do, just give me that one, Ahum, if you can get access, and then you can all read it. It comes from Tulku Urchin Rinpoche. It really gives us a good idea. Just that one of the external universe, and let them all read it, and then we'll do the meditation.
I don't have that, Mel. Yeah. No, you didn't send.
I did send you. I sent you this ordinary body of momentary delusion, and then I sent you another one. Didn't I? Yeah, I did.
I haven't got it, Mel. It didn't come through.
Oh, well, I sent it to you. Okay. Well, let me just read it to you anyway. Goes like this. Ahum. The external universe, the nature of space, is the realm of 5-colored light. That's how you see it, 5-colored light. The inner contents of sentient beings are the 5 male and female families. Everything in the nature of the 5 wisdoms is spontaneously present as the display of Samantabhadra. Samantabhadra is the primordial Buddha. It's just an expression for the ground. And so the external universe is these beautiful colors. The inner contents of us are 5 male and female families. Everything is the nature of the 5 wisdoms, and it's spontaneously present as the display of Samantabhadra. It's very fascinating, you've got to admit. I know this is hard. I just want to introduce it to you. I'm perfectly happy if you use boundless vision in your relationships with people. But let's do the meditation now. Just a little. So breathe in and breathe out and come to this beautiful moment. And just think about when your whole being, when that life force strikes your being, and there is absolutely the beautiful 5 rays coming out of your essence. And I want you to really, really, really ponder those 5 rays. I want you to see the beautiful, beautiful colored lights. And as they come out, each one is a different level of awareness. So there is a beautiful white light, and it's mirror-like primordial consciousness or mirror-like wisdom. It's the Vajra family, really beautiful. Vajrasattva and Mamaki. And the element is water. When the water is pure, then you have mirror-like wisdom. When the anger and hatred ceases, it becomes mirror-like wisdom, that pure, pure white realm. And the skanda, the aggregate, is consciousness. As soon as it's recognized, the consciousness becomes pure, pure primordial consciousness. from the 5 sense consciousnesses and all the 8 lower consciousnesses. The consciousness completely transforms when you can see the real white light. And when you see the yellow light coming out of the crystal, it's the Ratna family, the pure earth element with beautiful offerings. The Ratna family is gold. All the offerings are there. It's part of us. The skanda, the aggregate, is your feelings. All the feelings are transmuted. The poison of the Ratna family is pride. There's no more pride. If you're a proud and arrogant person and you see this beautiful yellow light of this beautiful equalizing primordial consciousness, it means everything is equal. Everything has Buddha nature. It's pure. It's yellow. It's the golden offering of the earth. And it takes away all pride. And it takes away all the 6 realms of samsara. And each of these has a beautiful activity. The enlightened activity of the Ratna family is increasing, enriching, instead of the pride and arrogance of the individual. And then when the actual red lights come steaming out of the crystal, the pure red light, it's absolutely pure. You see it. It is the lotus family of Amitabha, the lotus family. It's red, full of the passion for the Dharma. And the skanda, the aggregate, is perception. You go from absolute impure perception to seeing things as they really are. You see the ultimate. It's absolutely pure. It's red. It's a lotus. Its activity is magnetizing all and sundry into the beautiful light. And then we see the blue light of the beautiful wisdom of Dharmadhatu, pure, open spaciousness of the Buddha family. The Buddha family is exquisite, absolutely exquisite, blue, open. It's got so much in it. It's absolutely beautiful. That wisdom of the Dharmadhatu, its poison is ignorance and delusion. It's blue in color. The element is space, wide open space, blue, absolutely pure. Its poison, if you don't see it, is ignorance and delusion. You know, those stories we tell ourselves all the time. And the skanda, to be purified, is your form. You're changing your whole form into a Vajra form. Each one, and the enlightened activity of the wisdom of Dharmadhatu is actually pacifying. When you pacify people, you treat them very gently and you try and bring them back to be able to see the truth. And the last color is the green color of the action accomplishing wisdom. Now think of this green light coming out, and the poison is envy and jealousy. The green light can't be action accomplishment wisdom, then it's envy and jealousy, hating people who are better than you. It's green in color. It's the karma family, and the element is wind or air. And the enlightened activity is perfected action. And it's a Mogasiddhi and Samaya Tara. So just to give you a little idea of these beautiful lights and how they come out of your essence, and how if you see them, there are no more aggregates, there are no more poisons, there are no more sense objects. You see the pure light of the 5 modes of awareness. And that's what you're going to see when you die too, if you open your eyes to it. That's enough teaching for all of you, because I mean, I've got so many beautiful things to teach you, but that's enough. I can see it fully. Okay. But Kathy, what do you feel? What do you think? What do you feel?
At the moment, I'm like not. I'm focusing on my life on the UK stuff. So, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, today it's just today, because this suddenly came into my life today, and it's got to be done in the next few weeks.
So leaving out anyone else.
I'm sorry.
See?
Yeah, the thing that confuses me though is you say that the life force comes in and sort of opens you up, but isn't Buddha nature within you? There's nothing that comes from outside. You are actually trying to pull something out from, I don't want to try and describe it like this, but from within. It's from within you that this all kind of materializes and manifests. I'm a bit confused as to why something is coming in when there's nothing to come in.
Look at it external. It's not something comes in. It's the life force within that awakens you and suddenly makes you realize that all the vision, the way you've seen it, is actually completely and totally misconceived. We've done it for so long, it's not really the truth about how we see things. And that's all. Don't worry about a life force coming in. They give the analogy of the crystal and the sun shining on the crystal. And when the sun shines on the crystal, you do get a pretty good idea. But the sun is the life force, you know.
Yeah.
And the life force is already in you, but it's almost like when they talk about how the creation works, he says that something strikes the consciousness and then it all opens up. So it's just, you could don't even call it a point in time, you know, not in time as we know it, but a point at which you just awaken to, you know, to your higher, to a different level, not even higher, a different level of consciousness from all the material things, all the things we used to, all the stuff we do, to a primordial consciousness, which is beyond all of the sense objects, everything. Yeah, when you really think about it. Linz, you thinking.
You've given me a lot to think about. Thanks. Really interesting.
Yeah. No, it's just, I don't care tonight. If none of you can actually get there, it's not even important. It's just to know, to wake up and know that our vision is limited, you know, and that we are operating on such a limited vision. And this is just a little touch of like opening up and seeing there's so much more. You know, I go and I sit. Taisitu taught me to go and sit in the mountain. He said that you just look out at the sky. So I started to see first these Vajra chains. And you know, Vajra chains are these little curly things. They're all curly kind of things intervening. They sometimes call them like a horse's tail, knots and things like that. That's your awareness. You're actually seeing your awareness in front of you. And then it starts developing into colors. And he says, sit at the mountain and just watch the sky and just allow, through these eyes, allow yourself to see what there really is. And I think you should all do it when you're in nature. You should just look. And it really helps sometimes if you close your eyes a little, not close them, but you just make them a little narrower. Then you'll see those Vajra chains. Those are your awareness. It's very lovely when you start awakening that consciousness. Yeah, Mim?
Can you see this little thing? It's so lovely. It just says, I was free once I realized the cage was made of thoughts.
It's lovely. I was free once I realized the cage was made of thoughts. Yeah. And how free are we when we begin to discover and we don't touch? And really, Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche said to this girl who said, how do I find shunyata? How do I find emptiness? How do I meditate on it? He said, you just sit and you just allow your thoughts to come. And then another, and then another, and then another, and then another. And you just let them come up and you let them dissolve. And eventually you realize they do dissolve. And then there's space. It's amazing how much space there is. So let's dedicate. You can just give this some really deep thought and you can think about it. And also when you go to sleep at night, just allow yourself to really relax and see what there actually is. It's very, very beautiful to see. And even if it's just in terms of looking at people, I'm very happy in a different way. So for all those who are suffering, for all those in the wars and in all the terrible things that are happening, we dedicate this teaching and we really hope that a few people in this universe can get something out of this teaching. Through this merit, may we achieve all-seeing Buddhahood, and thereafter, once all harmful enemies have been defeated, may all beings be liberated from the ocean of existence, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Sonam die tamche zipane, topne nepe tranam pamshene, Jegana jibala dropaye sipe sole doa dro warsho.